Syracuse football loses another four-star recruit.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, a little bit of a sour note. In Syracuse football recruiting, we have to be honest, it hasn't been very good over the last few days, as four-star linebacker Izayia Williams has decommitted from Syracuse. And not only is he decommitted, he is no longer considering the Cuse. His final three schools are in the state of Florida. It's Florida, Miami, and Florida State. So we're going to go over that. Then we're going to talk about the recent flips that have worked for Syracuse, so in Syracuse's favor, and also against Syracuse. And then finally, we're going to go over the 2026 recruiting class, which once had 3 four-star players, 3 players overall, and now it is down to just 1. 1 player left in the 2026 recruiting class. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so let's start off with the news, which is that last night, Izayia Williams, a 4-star linebacker from Florida, decommitted from Syracuse football. Now, Izayia Williams' recruiting journey has been full of twists and turns. In November of 2023, Izayia Williams was committed to Louisville. All right, so he was with Louisville. 2 months later, he decides to reopen his recruitment. And then he commits to Syracuse in mid-April. So a little bit of a tease to the next segment. That's a flip that actually worked in favor of Syracuse in that regard. It worked in favor of Syracuse. But then, of course, everything changed. It was speculated for a long time, and now it is confirmed. He is decommitted from Syracuse. He is now only considering 3 programs, Miami, FSU, and Florida. As he has said, he wants to stay in his home state. And like I said, this was not out of the blue. Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith said multiple times on the podcast that it was going to be very difficult to keep Izayia Williams in the 2026 recruiting class. And also what makes this sting is that Demetres Samuel, who was a top 80 recruit in the country, committed to Syracuse in 2026, he also decommitted. He decommitted, he reclassified to 2025, and is now with the Florida Gators. So another Florida kid staying in his home state. And I understand that. I am not mad at these kids by any means. I want to make that very clear that while I am frustrated, I'm frustrated at the situation. I don't want to see players leave the team that I love. I love Syracuse. I want Syracuse to get all the best players. And when they do get the best players, I hope that they stay. And they didn't stay in this case. And so it's frustrating, but I'm not mad at the kids themselves for making a decision that is, of course, best for them. They don't owe me anything. They don't owe you anything. They owe it to themselves to make a decision that is best. So I wish them nothing but the best. I am not knocking them by any means. I'm just frustrated that in the last few days, Syracuse football has lost 2 4-star recruits, Izayia Williams and Demetres Samuel. It's not fun, but I'm not blaming these kids. Now, I think it's also important to acknowledge the elephant in the room, because obviously these kids have said that they want to stay in the state of Florida, and a lot of kids will choose a school based on comfort, and I understand that. But NIL, I think it's fair to assume that NIL played a factor into this, especially because those schools can offer more NIL money than Syracuse probably can. Probably. Here's why kids are taking more NIL money maybe, or why it might be happening more frequently that kids are decommitting, because decommits have happened for a long time, but now it might be happening more than usual. And it's with NIL. And I'm not mad at these kids for taking NIL money. And here is why. This is going to be like the ultimate scare tactic. So if you're a Division I athlete, if you're a high school athlete that's watching this is going to scare you maybe, especially if you're a football player. 1.6% of Division I football players will make the NFL. That's it. Think about how many great players are in college football. Only 1.6% of Division I athletes are going to make the NFL. That is it. So already off the bat, you can see why kids in high school are taking, are going to pick a school a lot of times based on where the money is, because most of them will not get to the NFL. Only 1.6%. Now say you make the NFL. You did it. Congratulations. You have reached the pinnacle of achievement in football playing. You have made the toughest league there is in football, and that is the National Football League. That's the toughest one. You made it, and I don't diminish that by any means. The average NFL career, it is so difficult. The average NFL career is a little over 3 years. That's it. So of the 1.6% of Division I football players that are making the NFL, most of them are barely going to play 3 years in the league. And you might say, well, you'll make millions of dollars in those 3 years. And not necessarily. If you're really good, you will. If you're a first-round pick, you will, right? Caleb Williams is got like a $40 million guaranteed contract with the Bears. Obviously, that's an outlier, though. Most of them are probably going to be picked on day 3, which is rounds 4 through 7. If you're picked in that range, you're only guaranteed a few $100,000 at signing, and that's it. So you can be cut at any time with basically no compensation other than what you got as your signing bonus, which could be a couple $100,000. I actually looked it up. Brock Purdy's contract, his rookie deal as Mr. Irrelevant, was only about $70,000 guaranteed. So on top of that, you're going to get taxed. You're going to owe the agent that you have. If you have an agent, you're going to have to pay union dues. So all that being said, if you only have an average NFL career and you were an average NFL draft pick, which is day 3, you might not make a lot of money either. So I completely understand why kids are saying, I gotta chase the bag. I gotta get money. And I'm not necessarily saying that Demetres Samuel and Izayia Williams did that, but we have to acknowledge that the schools that they are considering or committed to, they all have they have bigger budgets than Syracuse football. We just have to accept the reality that they do. So I'm not mad at them by any means. I wish Izayia Williams and Demetres Samuel nothing but success. I hope they do great. I hope that they do make it. And I completely understand why they made their decisions. So for Syracuse, you just have to move on and keep going with the 2026 recruiting class. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about recent flips that have worked in favor of Syracuse and some players that were committed to Syracuse but then decided to decommit. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And if you're itching for football season like I am, guess what? FanDuel has released the odds for Syracuse's first game against Ohio. And the Orange are 15.5-point favorites to get the W. You think Syracuse is going to cover? Well, bet it right now on FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. On today's show, Syracuse Football 2026 recruiting has hit a bit of a snag, right? Izayia Williams, the news last night broke that four-star linebacker Izayia Williams decommitted from Syracuse and is no longer considering the Orange in his recruitment. So it sucks, and that's coming on the heels of Demetres Samuel decommitting from Syracuse, reclassifying to 2025, and committing to Florida. Obviously, it's tough, it's frustrating, but I am not mad at the players by any means. Now let's go over some players who have flipped in favor of Syracuse in recent years and some players that have, well, decommitted from Syracuse. So let's talk about 2024. Okay? Let's talk about 2024. Four-star wide receiver Emmanuel Ross. He's one of the better commits in 2024 class for Syracuse. He's one of the best, if not the best. Well, did you know that Emmanuel Ross was originally committed to Stanford in June of 2023? He was committed to Stanford. And then he flipped. He flipped to Syracuse in mid-December and then signed with the Orange about a week later. So that's an example of a four-star player committed to a different school, flipping in favor of Syracuse. And my larger point here is that it's easy to be mad at the situation, obviously, when it works against your team. When it works against Syracuse like it has in recent days with Izayia Williams and Demetres Samuel, it sucks. And we just get frustrated and we're upset and we're mad that the players are flipping and we're saying, why are they flipping? What's even the point if they can just flip? Well, in reality, if we're going to be mad, which I am in this case, that the players are flipping and it sucks, if we're going to be mad at that, then I'm also going to be happy when players decide to flip in favor of Syracuse. And Emmanuel Ross is an example of someone who was committed to Stanford for months and then decided to flip at the last moment to Syracuse and sign with the Orange a week later. Like, it happens. For and against you. Three-star wide receiver Jalen Hornsby. He was committed to Texas A&M. Flipped it to Syracuse. Great. We're all happy about it, right? Three-star running back Yassine Willis, who had a monster spring game. And I think we're all excited to see him play. Yassine Willis. He was committed to Pitt. Now he's playing for Syracuse. It works for and against you. It happens, right? So those are just three examples in 2024 that I can think of off the top of my head. Okay? 2025, we're already seeing it. Khalil Stewart, an offensive lineman committed to Syracuse. Well, he was originally committed to Maryland. So the Orange have already flipped someone in the 2025 class. Right there. Boom. Mike McAllister has also said on Orange Nation, I believe, he said that Syracuse, even though they didn't get four-star linebacker CJ May in 2025, he alluded to the fact that the Orange are still recruiting him. Why do you think that is? Because CJ May, and I'm not saying he's going to flip his recruitment or he's going to flip his commitment, he hasn't signed with Louisville. Right? Nobody can sign until the early signing period, which is in December, I want to say. I think it's in December. I said the date before on the podcast. But the point being is that nobody in the country in 2025 has signed yet. So technically, all the verbal commits are just verbal, and players can flip and choose whatever they want to do at any time until the early signing period, of course. That's why they're still recruiting CJ May, even though he said he wants to go to Louisville. All right? Now, players that have flipped against Syracuse, two of them I've already talked about, right? Izayia Williams, he's flipped twice. He was originally a Louisville commit. Then he flipped to Syracuse, and now he's flipping to one of three schools: Miami, Florida, Florida State. All right. Demetres Samuel, talked about him too. He's now reclassified to 2025. He's with Florida. I didn't really touch on this on the podcast either, but Henry Searcy, a long snapper committed in the 2025 class for Syracuse, is now going to Pitt. He's committed to Pitt now. So with all that being said, it's, once again, it's easy to feel frustrated when players are decommitting from the program because you don't want to see players decommit from the program. But at the same time, we're cheering or pom-poms are out when a player decides to flip to Syracuse, and we're really happy about it. So I guess the takeaway here is that you kind of just have to move on and almost like be a soldier. You just have to, keep trucking along here. That's just how it is in recruiting. You just don't know at any given moment what is going to happen. You have to stay on your toes. And that even when you land a verbal commit, you still have to keep recruiting. You still have to keep recruiting. That is the bottom line. You could say there's no loyalty and everything like that. And I agree with you. There really isn't a lot of loyalty, but there's a reason for that. And that's a lot of NIL money and everything out there, and comfort, and the fact that they don't have to show loyalty sometimes. If you're looking for loyalty, sports is not the place to go. That's just the truth. There used to be loyalty in college football and college sports for that matter, but the rules have made it so that it no longer really needs to be the case. Right? It was forced. It was forced. Now it's the transfer portal, NIL. If you want loyalty, sports are not for you. That's all I'm going to say on that. So, yeah, it's easy to get mad when players are decommitting, but, players have also come to Syracuse flipping their commitments. So it's good and it's bad. But bottom line is recruiting just keeps you on your toes. Now, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the 2026 recruiting class and how there's only one player left in it. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over Syracuse football recruiting, and it's really not so great news. Usually, it's been good news with recruiting. Today, not so much, with four-star linebacker Izayia Williams deciding to decommit from Syracuse, reopen his commitment to three schools, and reopen his recruitment to three schools, and that's Miami, Florida, and Florida State. We talked about that. Then we talked about the recent flips that have worked for and against Syracuse, and the bottom line is that it's recruiting, and until the players sign, anything can happen, right? So you have to stay on your toes, and you have to keep recruiting the kids even when you have verbal commits. Now it's time to discuss the 2026 recruiting class as a whole. And right off the bat, I want to say that I am not worried for the 2026 recruiting class. It is super early. And even though it sucks, they lost two players. How many times can I say that this is so frustrating that they lost two blue chip players? Blue chip recruits, they lost them, and it sucks. I cannot say it enough. But at the same time, am I really that worried? No. I'm not that worried at all, because we're like a year and a half until any of these kids could sign with the program anyway. We're so far out, it's early, right? It's early. So who is technically, or I should say this, verbally committed to Syracuse? Well, there's one left. It's D'Antae Sheffey. He's 5'11". He's 180 pounds. He's a running back from Pennsylvania. He is a 24/7 Sports composite 4-star recruit. So he's a pretty good player. And according to Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith, he said that Sheffey was probably going to be the easiest of the 2026 recruits to keep. And that seems to be the case with Samuel going to Florida and Williams going to one of the Florida schools, right? He was right on that assessment. And really the bottom line is from what Brian Smith said, which was last week or 2 weeks ago on the podcast, Penn State is not involved in Sheffey's recruitment so far. Now that can change, but as long as Penn State doesn't get involved, then Syracuse has a good chance of keeping their 4-star running back in 2026. So that's good news, but at the same time, everything can change, especially if Penn State gets in on the recruiting action. Now, as far as the overall class, Syracuse once had, I believe, the third highest ranked class in the country in 2026 because they had 3 commits and because of the pedigree of each of the commits they had. Now it's down to 35 on 24/7 Sports, which is right along the same lines as what they are for 2024 and what they are for 2025, in the mid-30s. It's not bad. I mean, it's better than in most years with Syracuse football. And be honest with you, like I said, I'm not worried about the 2026 class just yet. It's too early to hit a panic button by any means, but it's so early. I don't even know how to judge the 35th ranked class when you have only one player in it. So take it with a grain of salt, but that's just where their ranking is on 24/7 Sports. I do finally have positive news. I have positive news for you all to share about 2026 recruiting because I was going through the 24/7 Sports' website. And I was just seeing like the players that Syracuse has offered in the class. And there's obviously a ton of offers out there, right? You're not going to get most of the offers that you send out. But anyway, 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell has quote unquote warm interest in Syracuse football on 24/7 Sports. Warm interest. That's significant because there's only 2 other schools that are listed as having warm interest for him, and that's Florida State and Miami. And shocker, a Florida kid wants to go to a Florida school potentially, right? Now, Russell is 6'5". He's 190 pounds, and he is a top 10 overall player in the country. This would be the best recruit Syracuse football has ever had since 24/7 Sports began tracking recruiting in 1999. That was when they began tracking it on the website. So it would be the best recruit they've ever had. At minimum, because you have to count 2025, 2026. So 2026 minus 1999, I'm doing quick math here, is 27 years. 27 years. That would, if Calvin Russell were to somehow commit. Now, Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith is fairly confident that that's not going to happen. Calvin Russell's going to go elsewhere, so that's why he'll treat me to a steak dinner if he decides to sign with Syracuse, which is still about a year and a half away anyway. So we'll see if that bet will actually cash in. But that's the positive news that I have on the front of the 2026 recruiting class, which is that they seem to have mutual interest with Calvin Russell, who's one of the best players in the country. We'll see what happens. Do they get him? Hopefully. Probably not, to be honest with you. But hey, it's good to be in the running. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so that is it for today's podcast, going over Syracuse football recruiting, which was really not the greatest news. It's just the facts. Izayia Williams decommits. Demetres Samuel decommits. Right? That was a few days ago. But hey, we ended on a positive note with Calvin Russell, right? And once again, am I worried about 2026? No, I'm not worried. There's still so much time until any of those players can even sign. Even the 2025 guys can't sign yet. So 2026, not worried. There's still so much time, so much potential in either direction to be really good or really bad. We don't know. At least they still have one commit, though, as well in D'Antae Sheffey. So hopefully Syracuse can hold on to him. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. Also, the Poll Friday question is up on Twitter, which is at @LO_Syracuse. I asked you guys the question this week. What do you think is the best position group on Syracuse football's roster for this upcoming season? And I gave you guys 4 choices to choose from. It was running backs, tight ends, or the defensive backs. So go on Twitter and vote. You can also vote on YouTube in the YouTube community section for Poll Friday, which will be out Friday at 6 p.m. Everyone, take care.